Talk Show.
Recorded live.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rod. Today's topic is a heads-up warning. Take it with a grain of salt, but be careful, okay? I come across an incident here yesterday that got escalated. And from my take of what I was told, and my impression that I got from what I was told, is the law enforcement across this country is basically gearing up to start shooting down unarmed citizens. One of my callers, one of my listeners, had went down to a state highway patrol barracks, and on the captain's door there was a sign that was posted basically authorizing the shoot down of any civilian with clear conscience of shooting them. And this is posted on the outside of the captain's door down to Highway Patrol Barracks. From some of the conversations that's being had is they are getting more and more paranoid about the paperwork going in. They're getting more upset because we're getting too close, because we're actually bringing the real laws into these courtrooms. And this is really upsetting the apple cart, because they're basically being told to disregard what the law is. And this goes back to the Bar Association. And law enforcement, you know, we're not trying to make life rough for you. We're really not. But you are being used as pawns, and you're being used as scapegoats, because the ones who are coming in here and telling you how to interpret the law, instead of you going back and reading it yourself, is members of the Bar Association. They're the ones who's writing this stuff up. So they've got to come in and indoctrinate you on how you are to interpret it, and you are to disregard the actual writing in the law. You are to totally disregard the intent of how the law is written in the annotated versions. You're being indoctrinated. And I want to remind you people of something, all of you out here. Nuremberg, after World War II, Nuremberg had two trials. One on the military, because the military said we was only following orders. We was only doing what we were told. We was only following command. But the second one was on public office. And they too, well, we're only following orders. We was only doing what we're told. You need to go look up the history of the Nuremberg trials on the military and on the public side of this thing for public offices. Following orders, knowing that they're illegal, and knowing that they are immoral and violate good conscience. Ladies and gentlemen, the military has always had a standing rule: never follow an illegal order. If it is immoral and it violates your understanding and it violates your morals, you are not to follow an illegal order. What we are coming across talking with some of these officers out here is when you start explaining the law, basically the comment comes back is, well, that's your understanding. No. It is how it is written in law books. Well, that's your understanding. No, that's not my understanding. It is how the law books are written. It's how the codes are written. And when you get into a conversation, the first thing that come up, well, you don't believe that the law applies to you. Why do you figure the law don't apply to you? I said, well, let's go back and look at the definition of the word person. The word person is to be construed to be a trust, an estate, a joint stock share, a corporation, an association, a firm, an agency, an instrument of a government. Where does any of this apply to the flesh and blood? And they don't have an answer. Well, that's your interpretation. No. I could take you right in and I could show you exactly where the definitions is at. I could show you exactly how they're worded. Because under Title 27 CFR 72.11, meanings of terms: person, a trust, an estate, a partnership, an association, a company, or a corporation. And it has the word individual. That definition of the word individual comes out of Title V, which is government organizations. And under Title V, under government organizations, under 552A, it clearly goes back in and defines the word individual to mean a citizen of the United States and aliens lawfully admitted for permanent residence. Now go back and think about what the word citizen of the United States means, and go back and look at the boundary markers of the District of Columbia. The boundary markers of the District of Columbia shows the jurisdiction of the United States within that 10 square mile. On the back side of them boundary markers, it does not say United States of America, Maryland, United States of America, Virginia. It says the jurisdiction of the United States is within that 10-mile square. And on the outside is Maryland and Virginia, distinct from the United States. That's not my saying. That's not my opinion. That's not my concept of it. That's engraved in stone. Literally engraved in stone. But these law enforcement officers, ladies and gentlemen, they are being indoctrinated by the Bar Association. They're being told to disregard the written law, because it really doesn't mean that. We'll tell you how to interpret it. We'll tell you how to go back and use it. But they're also being indoctrinated to not to hesitate to pull out a pistol and pull a trigger. This now presents a problem out here, because even if you are going for a registration in your vehicle upon the request of said officer, or you are going for your wallet upon the request of that officer for ID, you now can be shot. Because he's got a claim that he was in fear and he thought you was going for a pistol or some type of weapon, that he had to shoot you after you was asked to get registration and license out. This now gives him justification to shoot you down. Ladies and gentlemen, this creates a very serious problem here. You cannot come in compliance without the fear of being shot now. By you coming in compliance, you can be shot. By you not coming in compliance, they're now going to charge you for obstruction and the possibility of being shot anyhow. The paranoia on their side of their indoctrination, these guys are being hyped up so bad by the Bar Association. They're being hyped. They're being programmed. and that is really detrimental to the private citizen out here, because it makes it impossible for you to be law-abiding whenever they are hyped up of pure paranoia on their side of the fence. And when they are coming across that they are in fear of you, especially if you've done the type of paperwork that I've done, and you're being told that they are being told to be in fear. And I want to tell you people something here. You know, Benjamin Franklin was a very smart man for his time period. And he's right, the pen is mightier than the sword. And it is the knowledge, it is the type of paperwork that is now being put out, that we are now addressing the terminologies. We're now addressing their rules, their procedures, their guidelines. We're now addressing, do you have a warrant? Do you have a corpus delicti? Did a judge sign a sheet of paper for you to serve me? And when you're going back in and you're pulling up case law and you are pulling up the laws, the statutes, the codes, that goes back in and lays all this stuff out, and especially if you get into the annotated version. Get into the annotated version, because this is where the laws are defined. And it sits here and tells you how that law is to be interpreted and how the intent of that law is to be used. When you start bringing in the intent, you start bringing in the initial foundation of that law, it rattles their cages. It rattles their cages to the place to where they cannot answer you. And from what is being said is that a lot of the paperwork that being put out is that it is going to the upper echelon people, the feds. It's going up the ranks. And what they're doing is they're going through and they're seeing that they cannot get around their legal definitions, because we're actually bringing in the real law on this. They cannot get around it. What they're doing is they're putting it in file 13 and sitting in a paper shredder. So they're not answering the paperwork. This now comes into obstruction. This now comes into official oppression on their side of the fence. This now comes into that ultravirus misconduct and misbehavior. Because under the ultravirus side of this thing, let me pull up the document that I've worked on, and it goes into the ultravirus side of this. And it explains what the definition of the ultravirus is. And this is something that is very essential to understand. It says, ultravirus definition, Latin meaning beyond the powers. Described action taken by government bodies or corporations that exceed the scope of power given to them by laws or corporate charter. When referring to the act of government body, legislation, a constitution is most often the measuring stick of the proper scope of power. Let me read that again. Ultravirus definition. Latin meaning beyond the power. Described action taken by a government body or corporation that exceeds the scope of power given to them by laws or corporate charter. When referring to the act of government bodies, legislation, a constitution is most often the measuring stick of the proper scope of power. These people are in violation of ultravirus misbehavior. They are going beyond their scope of the measuring stick of what they're supposed to be. You need to go back in and re-update your 63 American Jurisprudence 2D, public officers and employees, under that 247. They have removed that out. That's no longer feasible from what I'm seeing. It's outdated. You need to look up Section 3. Nature as public trust or agency. Every public office is created in the interest and for the benefit of the people and belonging to them. Thus, a public office is a public agency or trust created in the interest and for the benefit of the people. Such trust extends to all matters within the range of the duties pertaining to the office. That is Section 3 of 63 American Jurisprudence. Section 15. A constitutional office is one created by the United States Constitution or by a state constitution. A distinction from an office created by statutes. A reference in a state constitution is particularly position. However, it does not automatically render that position a constitutional office. The legislative power over constitutional offices is limited. A legislation cannot abolish a constitutional office, nor can it change such an office except as expressly permitted by the Constitution itself. Thus, for example, the legislation has no power to change the title of a constitutional office. The legislature may, however, grant additional powers to the Constitution office by statutes. That's Section 15 under 63 American Jurisprudence. Section 185, malfeasance and misfeasance. You need to go back and look these up. Section 185. Section 241, fiduciary natures of duties. A public office must act primarily for the benefit of the public. By accepting a public office, one undertakes to perform all the duties of the office, and while he or she remains in such office, the public has the right to demand that he or she perform such duties. A public officer owes an undivided duty to the public whom he or she serves. Public policy demands that the public office holder discharges his or her duties with undivided loyalties, and that every public officer is bound to perform the duties of his or her public office faithfully. An officer or public employee duties of loyalty to the public and his or her superior is similar to that of an agent of private principles. As expressed otherwise, the powers delegated to the public officer are held in trust for the people and are to be exercised on behalf of the government or of all the citizens who may need to be intervened of that office. A public official is held to a public trust. That is a public officer occupation and fiduciary relationship to the political entity on whose behalf he or she serves, and stands in a fiduciary relationship to the citizens that he or she has been elected to serve. Public officers are fiduciary, and when dealing with public property must act with the most good faith, fidelity, and integrity. That's on 241. Go down to Section 243 and Section 244. Hold on. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, but what we're saying here is get into, but be careful, because I tell you what, the law enforcement, they're only going by what they're being told by the Bar Association. And the Bar Association, they're getting paranoid, because we're getting closer and closer of disrupting and exposing their corruption. And they're using the law enforcement as a means, as a shield to justify murder. That's exactly what it comes down to. They're going to say, well, it's homicide, it's self-defense. Bottom line is, if you're unarmed, they shoot you down, it's murder. This isn't going to be a long show. I'm just basically trying to give you a heads up here of what we are finding out. And law enforcement, they're getting terrified of the people because of what we're doing here for paperwork. And that's because the Bar Association is making them paranoid. And you start asking law enforcement to different things about the law, the first thing they're going to tell you, well, I can't practice law. Well, you're out here practicing law out in the street. Well, you're enforcing. No, that's practicing law. So just be careful. I'm just giving you a heads